For years, the food industry has leaned into functionality: higher protein, cleaner labels, optimized ingredients. But somewhere along the way, a lot of brands forgot something. Food still has to be fun. It has to taste good, it has to make people wanting to come back for more. And that's exactly what today's guest is building. Yousuf Ahmed is a former Goldman Sachs professional turned founder of B-Sides, a snack company reimagining what better-for-you snacking can look and feel like. They make allergen-free protein puffs using upcycled ingredients, but instead of leading with health claims, they lead with taste, nostalgia, and experience. What makes Yousuf's journey especially interesting is the path that he's taken to get here. He's bootstrapping the company, building a supply chain from scratch, and navigating the real-world trade-offs behind sustainability, packaging, and shelf life, all while raising a family and building a brand in New York City. In today's conversation, we explore what actually influences consumer behavior today, why so many healthy brands are missing the mark, and what it truly takes to build a physical product company from the ground up. You guys know I have a lot of experience in CPG marketing myself, and specifically in the protein and nutrition space, so I'm really excited to dive into this one. Yousuf, welcome to the show. You made the leap from Goldman Sachs into building a snack company. What sparked that transition and why B-Sides?
Yeah, so the spark was actually this idea of upcycling, which is basically taking the leftover oats from making oat milk or these kinds of leftovers from food manufacturing and putting them back into the food system. That was something that I encountered like 15 years ago, and it informed my path through Goldman Sachs. So I was a private wealth advisor at Goldman. What that means is like Goldman gives you a phone and a computer, and they're like, go raise $100 million from successful founders and entrepreneurs who have built companies and sold them. And that's like all the guidelines to it. So I did a lot of prospecting around environmental, social governance, and kind of impact investing. And what I found was like most of these companies, they were greenwashing basically everything. Like they weren't actually producing something that affected real change in the real world. And so after being at Goldman for a while, I had, it's kind of the throes of the pandemic. My wife and I were sitting in a one-bedroom apartment. I had spent the last 10 years managing other people's money, and I wanted to spend the next 10 years doing something else. And that question of upcycling kept kind of like wrestling. I had been wrestling with it. And so I basically went down that rabbit hole, that idea of these different byproducts. It exists all over the food system. I mentioned oats from oat milk. You've got, the press from juiceries. You've got grounds from coffee cafes, right? You've got grains from distilling beer or making alcohol. And I really wanted to figure out like, why are we just throwing all this stuff away? Like this seems like a gold mine. And so you go down that rabbit hole, you play with all the different kind of raw materials that are available. And that I stumbled onto the best and highest use of them was snack puffs. And, everything kind of unfolded from that. I just kept following the next lead and trying to answer the next question. I basically just started, calling up the breweries around the corner from me. What do you do with your leftover grain? Can I play around with it? Once I started experimenting with those ingredients, I started formulating ideas of like how best to use those ingredients. And I've tested multiple product categories. I've tested multiple raw materials, right? So not just the oats left over from oat milk, but, grounds from coffee and press from juices and grains from beer and alcohol. And that's how I stumbled onto kind of the snack category. And I figured that was the best and highest use for a lot of the stuff, the best way to make a company from it. That idea was just like, okay, now that you got a snack brand, where is there a white space in the snacking aisle?
Yeah, no, that's great. You mentioned that better for you snacks often miss the mark. They're either boring or overly preachy. Where do you think the industry went wrong with that and maybe is still continuing to do so?
Yeah, so when you think as an entrepreneur, your goal is to identify gaps in different industries and try and fill them. And for food, it's really easy to just default to kind of the ingredient label, right? Or some kind of nutritional component, right? So like that's why today we're seeing a lot of protein and fiber and macros and like how do we maximize and optimize for all these things? And to be fair to the food industry, there's a lot of improvement to be done on cleaning up ingredient labels. But ultimately, there were a lot of entrants in the space that were all trying to optimize for something or the other. And really what that missed was that's not ultimately why people snack. They're not trying to, fill nutritional gaps or live healthier lives necessarily. Those things are bonuses, but people, they're not about optimization. They're about like how you feel in the moment. And, when everything is about performance, you end up losing out on the experience. So for me, it was how do I make something that treats all these nutritional components as table stakes, which I think consumers today do. And then how do I make it more about the experience?
You can definitely relate to that, even just going and shopping yourself. A little bit about my background. When I actually first started in marketing, it was in CPG marketing and it was in the nutrition category. You mentioned that nutritional aspect. And I think, especially right now, the focus has been on macros, on protein intake, that even when you look at the packaging, you could tell it's going to be like a high protein snack, but it's not necessarily going to be the best experience. Like you said, might not be the tastiest, but you know that you're just like, you're hitting a number, you're hitting your macros. So there's definitely a need for those products out there that you can go and snack and have a good positive experience with, not just say, okay, check a box, I got my protein in for the day. Right now we're seeing that, especially with your company, you're really leaning into the nostalgia piece. Overall in marketing, we do see a trend going back to that Y2K nostalgia, millennial vibe. And I noticed that your branding is also very fun. What role do you think emotion plays in consumer decision making, especially when it comes to food?
I mean, in the context of food, I think emotion is everything.
Yeah.
You know the movie Ratatouille?
Yes.
So the famous scene in Ratatouille is when, the snobby food critic is like sitting down for a meal and the chef quite astutely sends him this dish. Ratatouille is basically stewed vegetables. It's a peasant dish. And the critic is skeptical of it, takes a bite, and it does like a memory unlock, right? And food is something that plays with all five senses. So it's easy for food to draw or like tug on those kind of emotional heartstrings because it plays in all the five sense domains. And for me, the 90s, I was a kid in the 90s, and there were a bunch of branding in food in the 90s was all about fun and not about function. And for me, when I created kind of a snack brand, I really missed that, like walking down the snack aisle in the grocery store and just seeing these wacky kind of color choices and insanely zany designs. And it didn't have to be about counting macros. And so when I try to approach emotion, you look at the packaging that I have developed and it's quite explosive. And so from a visual standpoint, how do you communicate explosive flavor or crunch if your only channel is like visual? Like that's why the branding looks the way that it does. And I wanted to bring that back. There's a lot of territory that I think was quite rich, but was perceived at the time as gauche or passe, and people just moved on. And I was like, no, I think we can bring that into today and play on people's emotions from nostalgia.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like sometimes too, even when you go shopping, you go through Publix, you go down the aisles and you're just like, a lot of the branding, especially in the snack industry, is very, I don't know if sporty is the right word, but it's more focused on the nutritional components versus your experience actually enjoying the food. And when someone's walking through the aisles, what would you say is actually driving the consumer behavior? Would you say it's the health? Would you say it's the price? How much does branding play a role in that? Or is it convenience, or maybe it's something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of the above. But so if you're looking at food, food is a pretty broad category, right? So are we talking about in the beverage aisle? Are we talking about in the candy aisle, right? There's all of the people walking down those aisles have certain experiences. And so when when you're playing in snacks, a snack is something that people I have found are reaching for when they're bored or between things, when they're looking for kind of a punch of excitement in their afternoon, or when they're collecting a novelty. Sometimes people just see wacky things and it's, $3. Like, okay, I'll buy that. To your point about if you're walking down the snack aisle today in Publix, a lot of the branding is quite minimal or beige or clinical. And it feels kind of like Apple basically did this to every category, right? Everything feels premium, and it's like, dude, I don't want a premium, snack puff. I just want a snack puff. I'm trying to itch that scratch. And so that's kind of how we approached it. And it was from the mindset of what do consumers actually think about when they're walking through the snack aisle? And so when was the last time you walked down the snack aisle and were like, hey, this beige packaging looks really delicious. I think I'm going to try to go for that.
That's exactly what I want to pick up. It's definitely a different mindset. I feel like too, especially with snacks, I've noticed there's two sides, right? You have the nostalgia side where you have the snack brands that have been around for a really long time, the ones that are the more of the 90s, early 2000s snack brands. It's just kind of a familiar taste. But I think in the back of a lot of people's minds with those too, so much has come out that we're so aware of the ingredients in them and how they're not great for you, that it kind of has a filter on those. Yeah, that looks great, but I don't really want to pick it up because I know how it's not great for me. And then you also have the other brands that, like you said, are very minimal, and it's okay, I'm going to pick this up and this probably isn't going to taste the best, but at least it's better for me. It's really interesting that you're disrupting the space in that area. When you're reaching for a snack, it's not necessarily to say, okay, let's like check a box and like we had X amount of protein for the day. You are grabbing it, whether you're going to the beach, you're going to do something, and like you want something in your bag. And I feel like if you have a fun experience, just even picking it off the shelf, I think that makes such a huge difference for consumers. All these things come into play. If it's really expensive or it's really inexpensive for some people, that's important to them too. But yeah, ultimately, I think packaging is huge for consumers in any area of business. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about how you're running this company. You are bootstrapping this company as you build it. Can I ask what this has caused you to do differently compared to maybe companies that are venture backed?
Yeah, so everything differently. For those kind of uninitiated to consumer packaged goods, you have to be super well capitalized because it's such a just competitive space. There's so many entrants in the space. It's very mature. There are kind of consumer life cycles that change periodically. And so when I was when I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I build this company, with an eye towards the bottom line from the very beginning, not courting venture capital almost by design, I've had to make a lot of kind of prioritization of what was going to matter most and what would move the business forward. And that can mean a lot of different things, right? Like, for me, it was important playing with these ingredients, all the kind of manufactured byproducts. How do I make something that people are going to want to eat? How do I make something that, upholds kind of the product promises, whether that's on the experience side or on the nutritional side? And how do I make sure that I'm not interpreting consumer feedback via a filter, right? Like somebody else is aggregating the feedback and, giving it to me, because I wanted to stay as close as possible to the consumer itself. So in terms of bootstrapping, I've just started quite micro. Like all of my runs are very small. I have a very small kind of marketing team. I've launched predominantly via e-commerce.
Have there been any trade-offs that you've had to make when it comes to like supply chain, shelf life, and packaging? And do you think that has also impacted your pricing and margins compared to like maybe if you were venture backed?
Yeah, totally. So like sourcing is a really great one. You can basically, if you're trying to play in the better for you space, there are only so many ways that you can make an ingredient list cleaner or shorter, and it means different things to different people. So like the gold standard, for example, is organic certified, right? And then like the next step down is non-GMO. And if you're sourcing at the creme de la creme, that's how you end up with like a $15 candy bar, right? Like it's pretty expensive to do that. And so really what you got to do is figure out, what matters most to these, like to your target consumer. And if you're using all of the top shelf ingredients, some of my ingredients are organic, some of them are non-GMO. I try to source the best that I can. The way that instead of viewing it as like trade-offs, the way that I've tried to view it is like, would I feed this to my toddler? And would I feel okay feeding this to my toddler? If the answer is yes, I'm okay selling it to a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, am I organic certified? No. Am I non-GMO certified? No. But I use all those ingredients and I'd like to get those certifications. But if I'm bootstrapping this thing, to make it a palatable price point, like I got to make that trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Same goes with packaging and, sustainability obviously means a lot to me, but you can't always go for that kind of packaging. It just like doesn't move in the category fast enough. There's no perfect solution. It's just trying to optimize all the decisions that you're making on a daily basis.
You have to really look at your target consumer and what's important to them. Depending on whatever product in the food industry that you're selling, you have a different consumer in mind. So maybe for someone that is, looking to appeal to specifically someone that's only going to consume organic ingredients, then you also have to think about the pricing that might be included in that and the time frame and how long it's going to take you to get approved to be able to use the organic label. This goes to all areas of digital marketing. It's something that's come up a lot this year, is just even in the content creation space, you're not trying to reach everybody. You're trying to reach your target. You're not going to appeal to everyone, but you have to lean into the people that are actually important to your business. That's when you really start to see the success there. If someone's listening and they've never built a CPG brand, what's one thing that would surprise them about how this industry actually works? Maybe you could share a little behind the scenes with us.
Yeah. Oh my God. How operationally detailed it is. So just for example, I make a snack puff. It gets packed in a bag. How many of those bags fit in a case? What are the dimensions of the case? How many of those fit on a pallet? How do you see what I mean? Like people just get the bag at the end of the day, right? Like they don't see all the stuff that goes into making the bag, whether it's the design or the supply chain or where it gets warehoused and moved around. Like it's so operationally detailed that like even for me, I don't have a background in CPG. And so I was just like, okay, guess I got to learn how to do pallet optimization now.
Great.
And like the other thing is everything moves way slower than you want
Yeah.
it to. And yet you have to move fast because you have a product that has an expiration date. Right. So like you've got to move as quickly as possible within the context of like just structural realities that are difficult. You know, buyer doesn't get back to you, distributor doesn't get back to you. It's, you know, you've got stuff coding out. Okay, I guess I got to go do like a sampling or something to use up this product that I have on hand.
Do you do any field marketing efforts? Like, do you actually go out into any of the retail locations or have a team that does that?
Yeah, I do it. I've done it basically all myself.
Okay.
I love doing demos. I love doing
Yeah.
field marketing because there's such a kind of rich story embedded in all of these puffs. Like nobody has basically ever heard of upcycling. And so when I tell people, you know, would you believe that I made these using the leftover oats from making oat milk? Like seeing that person's reaction when they try the puff, I mean, it gets me every time, makes my day every time, you know? Yeah, I still do the demoing myself. That's going to change within the next 3 months. We're going to launch in over 700 doors. Like I can't physically go to
Amazing.
700 doors, right? So yeah, but those are fun because you got to stay close to what the consumer wants and just one-on-one conversations is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you get so much feedback that you wouldn't get even from just online. You can ask a million times, how do you feel about this? Or what's important to you online? And people will answer, some people won't. But until you actually have the conversations with your consumers or with people that are just shopping at a retail location, it really helps to put the face to the brand. And then it also helps like you get so much valuable feedback from that too. What actually is important to you or how do you feel about this? And it can help kind of change some of your marketing too. It's at least what I've learned as well. So, as we wrap up this episode, if someone's looking to start their own CPG company, what was the first step that they should take? What was the first step that you took getting involved in this?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the product. Like, is the product, you have to nail the product. Is it something that somebody's going to want to genuinely enjoy? And is it something they're going to tell somebody else about? Because like you don't have a viable business if those two boxes aren't checked, right? And so, and by the way, that sounds way easier than it actually is. Like you've got to develop the product. You've got to get it into people's hands. You've got to pay attention to their responses. You've got to like get the feedback and incorporate and, you know, iterate on that. And then like, don't overthink. A lot of this conversation has been around like branding and what our branding looks like, right? And I launched the first iteration of this product not doing any of that. Like my branding was very minimal, like everybody else, because I wanted to see what people thought of the product itself before building a brand around.
Yeah, that's great advice. I really like that you touched upon the storytelling piece. I had one of our global marketing experts on recently, and he mentioned that the goal for a lot of brands is, you know, it's always been the focus has been on storytelling, but now it seems like there's quite a shift into the story living piece. So it's important to share your story from your brand exactly how you want your story to be portrayed, but the real value in the marketing comes once your consumers themselves then live that story and then share it with their friends. There's such an invaluable piece of marketing, which is not directly from the company itself, but it's actually from the users of your products are actually the strongest advocates for it. If you can get the story out to them and then they can share that story with their friends and their family and their coworkers or wherever they are, you know, if they're just walking around and they see someone or they're snacking on it in a public park and someone, you know, picks up on it. That's where the real conversations are and the real value is. I think it's important in any business, but specifically CPG, because walking through the aisles, if you see the product and you say, you know, my friend just told me about that and it's really cool how they source their ingredients, then they're definitely more likely to pick it up. So that's some really great advice there. But thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today. I really appreciate it. If anybody wants to pick up your product, where can they find it?
Thanks so much, Bex. They can either get it on Amazon or our website, enjoybsides.com, or if you're in the New York City area, we are launching in every conceivable bodega, grocery store, et cetera, in the next couple of months.
Awesome. Well, that's so exciting. Congratulations on that. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Bex.
This conversation really highlighted something important. Building a great product isn't just about the optimization, it's about understanding people, what they crave, what they remember, and what they reach for without overthinking it. Think about the last time you walked through the snack food aisle. What was the first thing that you picked? Did you pick something just because of the nutritional value? Did you pick it because of the packaging? Really consider that, especially if you're considering launching your own CPG brand. Yousuf's approach with B-Sides is a reminder that taste, emotion, and experience matter just as much, if not more, than the functional benefits we tend to focus on. Yousuf, thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with someone who's building or thinking about building a product, and we'll see you in the next one. Until next time, keep showing up, keep creating, and keep building your story.